So if we look at our test at the moment, the only bit that we have hard-coded is for this endpoint as well, for video games /1. Now if we happen to have lots of tests that call this endpoint, if that endpoint was to change, we would have to update it everywhere. So instead of doing that, we could store this endpoint in an actual interface. So let's look at how we would do that now. So to do that, I'm just going to add in a new interface here. I'm just going to call it endpoint. Get rid of this code that's created here. Zoom in a little bit. And so instead of calling the endpoints with the actual video game ID, I'm just going to call this one here that just returns all of our video games. So I'm just going to call this actual endpoint. We'll look a bit later on about how to call one with an actual query parameter, but to keep it simple for now, we'll just call this video games one that returns them all. So this is the exact endpoint that we're going to call. And so because we've already specified this first part, the URI and the ports and the base path in our rest assured options, we just need to specify this endpoint for /video games. So let's go ahead, go back to IntelliJ and do that now. So we're just going to set a string and we're going to call the endpoint get video games, or make it equal to that actual endpoint, which is /video games. Okay, so now in our test, I'm going to add in a new test below that's going to call for all video games. So we'll call it public void get all games. And we're going to make this test as short as possible. So instead of adding all of the given, when, then, we're just going to add the absolute minimum. So we're just going to literally add in when dot get, and then we're going to call the endpoint that we just specified. So we call the endpoint class, the endpoint interface, sorry, and then we call get video games on that. And that should be all that we need. So we're going to call this endpoint, this video games endpoint here. And because we've still got our test config here set up, it's going to hopefully supply in these headers for the application JSON and for the content type and the accepts. And it's going to do a response spec as well. So it's doing all of that work, all of this work here for the add headers, but this is literally our code. It's literally a few characters of code. So let's see if that test will work. And sure enough, the test passed okay. Let's run it once more and just check if we change this to, for example, the 201. Run it once more. So we're not actually logging anything this time because we're sending it for our proxy, and sure enough it's detected that it should have been a 201. Just going to change that back before I forget. And let's have a quick look at what we're actually seeing in Fiddler. So Fiddler's recorded both of the requests that we just made, they're both the same. And so then we can see everything that's been captured here. So we can see that the header's been added for the content type and the accept. And this is the raw data that we get back from the API. We can see that in a nice JSON format there. So again, as we go through the course, we'll look to keep adding to our endpoints class here, just to keep things nice and clean and neat. And as I say, if it gets to a point where lots of endpoints ever need to change and you have the same endpoint specified many times in the test, you would only have to change it once here, and that's a good programming practice to follow. Okay, I'll see you in the next lecture.